Hello, horror fan best friends and ghoulish knights, and welcome to the 25th episode of Murders with Mertens. I am your host, Joe, and this is a podcast about horror. Super meta slashers, dark comedies, body horror, the horror adjacent, thrillers, the psychologically terrifying, scary films in general. Each episode, I sit down with a guest and discuss one of their favorite scary films so that we can gush about everything that makes it just so damned cool. Viewers, thank you for tuning in. Also, non-visual viewers. Thank you for checking the podcast out on audio services around the world, or podcast services rather. Well, audio services probably too. Yeah, that counts. But yeah, thanks. I can see the map. There are people everywhere. It's interesting, but thank you. It's much appreciated. If you're so inclined, make sure to, drop a sub on YouTube. Give me a follow on your podcast service. If you can leave a rating, 5 stars is always appreciated. Helps get the word out. On YouTube, leaving a comment, leaving a like. Always like that as well. Again, if you are so inclined. Don't want to push you, but it's appreciated. So I don't want to drag any more housekeeping out any longer. But that said, this is part 2 of a 5-part series leading into Scream 6 in March. So join us for a new guest every week. And we're going to have some fun times here. And speaking of fun times and a new guest, I'd like to introduce the return of Keigan Hill. The one, the only Keigan Hill. Thanks for coming back on.
Thank you for having me back.
Yeah. Well, we had a fun time with X. That was good. Knew we'd get you back. But tonight's little episode is about 97's Scream 2, directed again by Wes Craven, written again by Kevin Williamson, with music not entirely this time again by Marco Beltrami, because we've got some Danny Elfman and some Hans Zimmer in there for good measure. Keigan, you chose Scream 2 as your episode. Tell me why.
So I watched Scream, the Scream franchise, or whatever you call them, for the first time back when Kind of Funny were doing their in review in the lead to 5 Cream, also known as Scream 5.
Sometimes even Scream.
Yeah. And I'd always wanted to watch them. And I'd always seen like the opening of the first one, which is probably one of the most iconic openings of any horror film. So I finally watched the series, and I'm probably in the minority of this was my favorite one out of all of them.
Really?
I don't think there's many other people that thought the same way, but I'm just a sucker for kind of what this one does, with it being kind of a university frat kind of, and then it's got the drama side of the drama school element and what they do with that at the end. But before I know you decided to do the kind of lead into Scream 6, I already brought this up. And
yep, this has been on the books for a while, so this works out. This
worked out really well. And I'm interested to see what they do with Scream 6 when it comes, but considering it's not got Neve Campbell or obviously David Arquette in it. So we'll see. But this one does, and that trio is probably some of the best comedy and banter that, especially Courtney Cox and David Arquette, they just
it's
on screen together. They're just so good.
Yep. The chemistry is absolutely there. I mean, clearly they were married and then not married, and even all these years later in other sequels, they're still great together. It's that is one of the charming things about this one. Keigan, I'm going to put you on the spot. Your Scream ranking, go.
So I'll go worst to first.
Okay.
So my least favorite was Scream 4. So that was kind of when they did there wasn't a reboot, but it was like kind of they brought it back after like Scream 3, which was, I don't know,
About
I
10
think that was
years,
2000.
give or take.
Yeah, so about 10 years, they kind of brought it back. Kind of what they did with Halloween, where they kind of, yeah, they did another one, and I just wasn't a fan of it. I know they tried to do kind of the modern take with it, um, and I love what's her name? The
Kirby?
who turns it? Not Kirby. Emma.
Oh,
She's in American Horror Story and
yeah.
a bunch
Emma
of things.
Roberts?
Emma Roberts. I
Yeah.
love her in American Horror Story. I love her in a bunch of stuff. So I was pretty excited about that one, but I just didn't love it as much as the other ones, and I think it because the older ones have that kind of they're just the way they are, kind of
Hmm.
that 90s, early 2000s feel. So my least favorite was Scream 4, although I do want to go back and watch them because if some things about the one we're doing now have changed. Um,
Yeah.
so I
I'll,
do want
I'll
to do a full rewatch.
I'll tell you, Scream 4 for me, the first viewing, didn't really care for it. Multiple subsequent viewings of it. Um, I'll tell you, it's grown on me to be pretty high on the list, ultimately. I just think it's, I don't know, it's also Wes Craven's final film, but, before he died, but, yeah, it's I'm shocked to hear it's so low. So maybe it's only because you've seen it the one time. I don't know.
It could be that.
That's how I feel about Step Brothers. I hated it when I saw it for the very first time, but boy did that movie grow on me.
Yeah, I just found it a bit boring. But again, a rewatch is very much welcome. Um, and then I would say Scream 3 next, which I know is the one that it's bad, but it's so bad. It's not. I
It's
mean,
camp. It's
yeah, and it is just it doesn't take itself seriously at all. And it's so
nope.
bad that inverted marks there. It's so bad that you just have to kind of roll with it. And there's just by the end of it, it's like, okay, this was just so much fun.
Yeah. Yeah, it's that one. Yeah, it's. I think I've got it basically at the same ranking as you. But going on from there, what's your number three?
So number three, or maybe actually, I think I missed. I forgot about number um 5. So I think I might have put in 5 next after 4
Oh,
because I remember I don't think I have it written down. So I think it might be 5 and then 3. So we'll talk about 5 anyway. But
hmm.
um, 5 I thought was good. Um, it was interesting, kind of what they did with some of the bigger cast members, like is it Dylan Minuet, um, and stuff, and his is it mum is she goes is
Hmm.
it her his mother is the officer from 4.
Yes.
Yeah, because this is the one where they bring all the kids in, isn't it?
Yeah.
Or they're like
Yeah.
kind of
Kind of
all the
like a
young.
new generation of Woodsboro survivors. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, and I thought that one was good. Again, this one really takes advantage of like kind of the internet and things like that, and they
Hmm.
tend they try
Well,
and
that
make it a lot more modern.
I'll say it till the cows come home. It's one of those things where this series is always like the perfect, like the perfect each part of the series is its own little like microcosm of technology and where it's at the time that the movie
Hmm.
comes out. And that's really one of its strengths. You know, a lot of people talk about technology in horror movies and how certain things don't exactly hold up all sorts of years later. Like, you know, people gripe about The Ring, and it's like, oh God, it's VHS, and, you know, just that it's just, it feels crazy dated, and, you know, the cheesy old cell phones and all that. And it just, you couldn't really do that story today necessarily. I mean, they've tried with modernizing it and it didn't exactly work, but, but, yeah, I feel like Scream always feels relatively fresh where that kind of stuff is concerned.
Yeah, I think they always pull in kind of what has evolved from the last movie, kind of,
Mm-hmm.
especially this one where they do um with the most recent one. There's a lot of kind of YouTubery type vlogging in it, and it's funny to watch.
So up from 3 and 5, kind of
Three
vying
and five.
for number 4 and number
I
3
thought they're probably.
respectively.
I mean, all the bottom three are probably interchangeable at some point. I don't think. Again, I've only watched them all once, so again, my opinions completely changed. Like it has slightly on two. Um, so my second spot would go to the original because um, it just is. It's obviously what started everything.
Mm-hmm. Gotta show it some
And
love. Absolutely.
yeah, and obviously Matthew Lillard and
Oh, he's
um,
unhinged. It's great.
oh, he's so good in it. Especially when you compare him from that to Scooby Doo, it's just like, how is this the same actor? Um,
Zoinks indeed. Yeah.
um, yeah, and obviously I hadn't seen it before from like the first time I watched it, and they toy so much with like, is it Billy? Is it not? Is it? And it's too obvious to be him. And then when it turns out it is him, it's like, but then obviously they drop that kind of, because it's the first one. It's like they start setting up the rules of like, oh well, there's actually usually two killers. So then they bring in Matthew Lillard, and it just, that whole final section is just, it's kind of like just iconic. And they have the Halloween on the background as well. Is it Halloween they have on? Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's
Yeah.
kind
I
of
love it.
paying homage to like horror, but it's also very goofy.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So, of course, that means that Scream 2 is your number 1. And yeah, I mean, we've talked briefly about that, the theater aspect, and just the, whole college atmosphere, all of that. That does make this an interesting watch. Um, so this came out my freshman year of college. My friends and I, from high school, and my high school girlfriend, um, we were all massive fans of Scream. We were super excited about Scream 2. So I think this was out around the time we would all be back home for Christmas break. And so I'm sure we all went and saw it. And at some point around then, we all decided it would be a fun laugh to prank my high school girlfriend who lived in a farmhouse way out in the sticks. And so we did. We had one friend in the whole ghost face get up, another one taped up to a chair in a Letterman's jacket. We had bodies hanging out of cars, and using her mother's cell phone, we used that to call the house and mess with her and get her to come outside. We are all going to hell.
Evil.
We're all going to hell. Oh God. In retrospect, it was horribly evil. And it's the kind of thing that, 18, 19-year-olds, think is funny. Especially back in 97. Now you think about doing something like that and you're like, okay, somebody's either getting shot or arrested, or something really, really, even worse could happen trying to mess with something like that. But Yeah, we're all going to hell, Keigan. Um, I'll save you a seat. But yeah, I guess that's why maybe I didn't bring it up in the last episode, even though what we did ties in more perfectly with that plot. But yeah, it just the fact that all of this was happening right around the time this movie came out, and I think we all enjoyed this movie quite a bit when we saw it. But yeah, we were bad kids at that time, I guess. No, we weren't that bad. But yeah, what do you say we jump into this thing? Um, Scream 2. We kick right off with the movie theater, and it's chaos, absolute chaos. It is a premiere of the movie Stab, which is based on Gail Weathers' book, The Woodsboro Murders. And everybody and their brother's going to see it, and nobody's going down the street to watch that Sandra Bullock movie, right?
Which movie could they be teasing?
Possibly Speed 2. I don't know. It's 97.
If this is taking place in 1997, because I couldn't think of like what could this be, or is this just like a off the cuff, or she was relevant at the time, so maybe they just like Sandra Bullock.
Yeah, I think at the time she was famous for like doofy rom-coms and stuff like that. So I think that could be it. We've got Omar Epps and Jada Pinkett are about to get done dirty here. I'm just going to come out and say it because it's one of the things that maybe doesn't necessarily hold up so well. 25, 26 years later here. But we've got two Windsor College seniors, Maureen Evans and Phil Stevens. They're attending this sneak peek. They're in line. They're talking about, she doesn't want to be there because she doesn't like horror movies. And when he's asking why, it's because, black folks don't fare well in horror films. And, she hates the trope. It's tired. And she's right. It is tired. But they kind of banter back and forth. He offers to go take her to, the Sandra Bullock movie. And, because, of course, she's what does he say? She's miss ethnicity. Being that, her movie is probably going to be a bunch of white folks doing rom-com stuff as opposed to a bunch of white folks getting cut the fuck up, as she says, in horror films. Yeah. So they go inside, they get their free souvenir screen or ghost-faced costumes. There's a long history of like movie premieres handing out little souvenir shit. And I remember some of this stuff from the late 90s too. So I suppose that's plausible. I remember at the time, maybe that same year, they were doing the special editions of the original Star Wars trilogy. And if you went to the right theater, you were getting a Luke Skywalker action figure as you went in, which was cool, But nothing as elaborate as a ghost-faced costume. They go to enter the theater, and again, absolute chaos. Everybody's in their costumes. They're chasing each other up and down the aisles. Popcorn's flying. Everybody's screaming. And the movie's actually starting while all of this is happening. And by the way, it's all set to Red Right Hand because you got to have that callback. That is like the unofficial theme song of the Scream series, right? I don't know. When you saw this for the very first time, Keigan, what was your take on this theater scene? Because it's nuts.
It's crazy. Like, I mean, I'm not old enough to have been to like many kind of midnight premieres or kind of even this type of things, but I went to a midnight showing and I was like, I couldn't imagine something like this. Everyone just seems like they're absolutely like, I mean, like coked up on something because they're just out of their absolute minds. Like, not one person is just sitting there. Like, everyone is just off their heads
Yeah.
and like pretend stabbing each other and
And is it
like
fandom over the book? Over the news stories that came out of these
it,
killings? Or are they just like all major horror fans in general?
or they're
I
all
don't
just like
know.
psychopaths that are
I
just like,
guess.
and then
I
like
don't know, man.
and the couple that we're focusing on, it's just like
Uh-huh.
they're just sitting there, they're the quietest like in there, and they're just like kind of, she's just had enough, she's like she doesn't want to be here. And
No, no, not at all. But she's doing this for her boyfriend because he's all hyped up to see this movie. Um, yeah. I love how Red Right Hand in this. It's being played as diegetic sound because it's like the opening song of Stab. Uh, that's love it, love it. It's like over the top meta, and they do crank that up to 11 in this movie, don't they? Let's see here. The film gets right into it with Heather Graham this time playing Casey. And it's kind of a heightened look at the Casey Becker house from the first movie. It looks like it's a house in Hollywood as opposed to whatever the small town in California was, Woodsboro. But she's, of course, about to take a shower when she's harassed by the Stab version of Ghostface. And Jada Pinkett's character, calls that out. The fact, why she got to be naked. Because of course that's a standard horror trope, right? It's, the vulnerability of being naked when being attacked by a killer, right? But everybody's like, wolf whistling at the screen there because of her disrobing, and everybody lets out these moans and boos when she picks her robe back up when the phone rings. So Jada's irritated by all this, and she takes some of Omar Epps' money to go buy popcorn because she's like, okay, if I'm going to sit here, I'm at least going to try to enjoy myself. And, she walks out of the theater, and the people in line behind her kind of remind the audience that, oh, yes, this is a film that's based on true events, which I think is making Maureen, Jada, I keep referring to people by their actors' names. It's a bad habit of mine. But, I think it's making her even more uneasy about seeing this film as she's listening to this. And then she's about to head back in. We get Phil popping out of nowhere wearing the free mask and scaring the shit out of her. And they have a tender little moment, but he's got to, go hit the head. And she goes to head back into the theater on her own. Of course, the thing you never want to do in a scary movie is split up, right? But she finds her way back to her seat, and he goes off to the restroom. And we're still getting, familiar scenes from the beginning of Scream, played out in Stab throughout all of this. It's just cutting back and forth throughout all of this. I love when he walks. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say the one thing I like about the Stab movie is that they don't have it like shot for shot like the first film. It's kind of loosely different, which
Until they
is
do.
yeah, until they do. But they start off kind of, it's loosely different. Where if you were seeing like some sort of, I mean, it's based on a book that she wrote, and she wasn't there for any of that.
Right.
So it's like.
And that's
like,
the funny bit later when they get some of those scenes that are almost word for word the same as the original film. We'll get there. But yeah, I do appreciate that it's a little bit different, just a little bit off, as it should be, right? But yeah, we get Phil entering the restroom, and there's that fun shot of the two guys at the urinals in their Ghostface costumes that both turn around to stare at him. That's kind of uneasy feeling. And he decides to, just go hit the stall because he's not going to wait for them. But
But
we
doesn't
hear,
close the door.
no, that's, if you're just going to stand up and pee, I guess it's not too bad, but it's also, I don't know. It's a little weird that he doesn't close the door, but I understand. But also, it's just one more instance where somebody's going to walk in on you because they're coming from the side or something. So close the door.
But then it also kind of it subverts your expectations where you could think, oh, someone can come
Mhm.
behind you, but obviously, what actually happens?
Right, because he hears this, kind of childlike whimpering and muttering coming from the next stall, and he finds it a little funny. So he decides he's gonna, put his ear up to the divider there to listen in, and yeah, that's when Ghostface knifes him through the divider. That's
How strong is Ghostface?
I know, and I'm sure they're just like particle board or something, but I don't know. I feel like those things are, maybe plywood at least. But yeah, it's funny because Ghostface is often alternatively super, like superhuman strength, but totally clumsy and easily beaten up by certain situations throughout these movies. I think he's just strong when the story needs him to be strong. But yeah, Phil's knifed in the head, and Ghostface comes out and finishes the job. And let's see here. Then we cut back to Maureen sitting there watching the movie, and she's kind of getting into it just a little bit. On screen, we've got Casey getting chased by Ghostface. Everything's kind of coming to a head. And Ghostface, wearing Phil's jacket, sits down next to her, and she's like, "Oh, you made it just in time. She's about to get it," she says. And when something scary happens on screen, she turns into his shoulder. And it's at this moment where she notices that he's not reacting to her like Phil normally would, and that his jacket's covered in blood. And then he just straight up stabs her in the gut.
Oh, because I think she hugs into him
Yeah.
and she finds the blood on his
Yeah.
hands or her hands.
Yep. Yep. And she's like, oh, something's not right here. And yeah, he just quickly turns, stabs her in the gut, and she tries to get away. He follows, knifes her a couple more times, and the audience sees all this and they're getting into it. And then
Also, one thing I noticed is when he has the knife in the movie Stab, and he
Mhm.
stabs her, and it doesn't even look like it goes into her. It looks like there's like a tiny expendable part of the knife that kind of just goes in. It just looks so bad, but I think it's like, is this on purpose or just it's
It's probably just bad editing with a prop knife. But because I know in years later in subsequent sequels, they use CG knives just so that they can make it look more realistic, and not potentially harm somebody. But yeah, this is where she climbs up on stage, and she's bleeding out and crying out for help, and everybody just thinks that this is some kind of a stunt, along with everything else that they've been doing in this theater, because they had a Ghostface dummy on a wire flying above the crowd and everything else, and then she just collapses on stage and dies. Um, So horribly paying into the trope of, the black folks being the first people to die in this movie. I get the meta nature of it, but let's be done with this. And I get also that it's, 25, 26 years ago. So I suppose it could be excused. I don't want to excuse it. I'm just done with it. And to that end, I'm glad about another character later on in this film. So yeah, we'll get there with that. But yeah, so she basically just dies after becoming the trope she was bemoaning 10 minutes ago. And then we get the title card of Scream 2. Where Sid is awoken by a prank call from a Ghostface wannabe, but she nails his ass with her caller ID.
I love this.
Yeah, I remember those caller IDs before it was the kind of thing you could get built into a phone. It was a separate device that you had to have plugged into your landline. It's just nuts to me that that's where we were 25 years ago. But yeah, we had one of those. Along with an answering machine. Yeah, because people didn't really have voicemail. God, I'm old. So yes, she nails his ass by reading his number and his name off to him and letting him know that prank calls are, a crime, blah, blah, blah. And he just hangs up on her. But she's over it. She just gets up. She finds it funny at this point. She, constantly gets harassed by these people, but she's able to turn the tables. Her roommate, Hallie, stops in. She shows concern about the call. Do we need to call the police? And, Sid's fucking over it. She's like, it's fine. It's the movie. Brings him out of the woodwork. It is what it is. But they turn on the TV. There's Cotton on a talk show or something, talking about trying to get over everything in his interview.
Interviewed by Kevin Williams.
Oh, no, you're absolutely right. I knew he looked familiar. You're absolutely right.
I didn't realize, I didn't know what he looks like, but it was when I was looking at who the cast was, and I was like, Kevin Williams, and it's like, Cotton Weary interviewer, and I was like, oh, really? That's because he obviously put himself in the movie.
Yeah, well, it's fun. Wes Craven likes to do that stuff. A lot of directors like to do that stuff. Why not the screenwriter? That's cool. So yeah, Sid doesn't like having to watch this shit because, she feels bad, but also she just wants to kind of get over things. And she goes to head off to the bathroom to get cleaned up for class. And that's when, even before this, Hallie's trying to get Sid to go to a sorority mixer that evening with her. And Sid doesn't want to do this. It's not her scene. She just, wants to do theater shit and hang out with her friends. But Hallie convinces her to go for, just an appearance. And that's where a random girl comes flying down the hall telling them to check out the news. And that's where we find out about the murders of Maureen and Phil the evening prior. And the girls are like, where's Randy? And Sid takes off to go find him. And everybody in the dorm is staring at her as she's walking through. And then she steps outside and she's got reporters pestering her. And we cut to Randy's film class, where Buffy and Pacey are arguing about, sequels. Are they the ones that bring up the sequel conversation? I think so. But yeah, Joshua Jackson and fucking Buffy, Sarah Michelle Gellar. Dawson's Creek was just about to get going around this time, and Buffy was probably in its second season. They were just about to hit the big time here, and that's fun because they're, both Kevin Williamson people. She was in I Know What You Did Last Summer. I think just the summer prior.
Is Portia de Rossi in this scene as well, or is she coming later?
She's just one of the sorority sisters with Rebecca Gayheart.
Okay.
But yeah. And we're also in this scene introduced to Mickey, played by Timothy Oliphant. And they talk about, sequels being inferior. But then the discussion moves on to, sequels that were superior to their original films. And they bring up two James Cameron films, Aliens and Terminator 2, of course. And
pretty apt.
Oh,
with the James Cameron sequel coming out 2 months ago, or less than 2 months ago.
Yeah. Yeah. And they even bring up Linda Hamilton later in the film too. But then the conversation finally ends with The Godfather Part 2 as a film that everyone can agree on, in the class at least, superior to the original. I mean, I think it's better than the original too, but I'm just saying there's people can make an argument that the original is better. But certainly both are better than the third. Most people agree on that. Third one's awful. But yeah, there's all this fun back and forth. Randy's being Randy. He's got fun banter with Mickey. And there's Sid at the door. Randy knows something's up. Probably because he saw the news as well. But so they take off. They're discussing, the killings. Randy doesn't want to believe that they have anything to do with them. He's trying to get on with his life. Obviously, he still holds a bit of a torch for Sid because he's irritated by the introduction of Derek here, Jerry O'Connell's character, who is Sydney's new boyfriend. He's got his whole get a room comment as they kiss just very chastely, actually, but obviously still not over her. And right about here is where Gail and the other news media, including local journalist Debbie Salt, descend on Windsor College. We're introduced to Gail's new cameraman, Joel. Salt is a pain in the ass right from the beginning, and Gail just dismisses her outright. And the kids are all watching all of this happen from a bit of a distance, but the police are about to have a press conference on I think it's the stairs of the precinct or something like that. And Gail just takes point as like lead reporter who's there. She's got her new cameraman. She's like snapping her fingers, directing his shots and everything else. And is the police chief David Arquette's father? The actor? I think he may be.
He is, because when I again was looking at the cast and it's something Arquette, and I was like, who is that character? And it's, I think it's the one when they're in the police station. It's the older guy. That's like, is he who's he? I can't remember who he's interviewing. But he's definitely. I think he's in it.
Okay. And then here's where we get the girls from the sorority that Hallie is pledging. They swing by and they irritate the gang. Of course, they're more interested in Sydney than they are in Hallie because Sydney's famous, and that's why they'd like her in their house. But they get commitments from the girls to attend the mixer that evening.
When they first walk up, it gives me such Mean Girls vibes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, they're like the leaders of this sorority, so of course they're mean girls. I can barely recognize Portia just because of how young she is in this movie. And I think Rebecca Gayheart was famous from all these skincare commercials that she was in leading up until her becoming an actual actress. So I think that was kind of a get for them at the time. And this is where Sid spots Dewey just kind of doing the John Travolta gif of, a little confusion and looking around. The one. And we are introduced to Dewey's theme, which is not actually Dewey's theme. It's actually Hans Zimmer's piece from Broken Arrow, a John Woo action film that he scored I think that same year or the year before, something like that. I guess this piece of music scored better with test audiences, so they just decided to keep it in. It's great because they use it going forward for the rest of the series. It's a good theme, but just funny how all that plays out. Everybody's
just such the puppy dog type character, especially in like the older ones. obviously in the newer one, not so much, but definitely in the older ones, he seems like such this kind of innocent kind of
Yeah, lovable
like
doof. And he's there because, he's concerned about Sydney. I love that this is supposed to be taking place in Ohio, and the murders happened the evening prior, and he's there that morning to check in on Sid. That's wow. Okay. So maybe that was on the news, and I know back then you probably wouldn't have Google alerts, but yeah, somehow he found out about this because it made national news and he caught a red eye or something. But he's there. And they have a little reunion with everybody. But yeah, his concern rubs Sid kind of the wrong way. She appreciates him, but he's going to go run off and talk to the police chief, and get the 411 on their investigation. And then Gail and her new cameraman, Joel, they try to stage this ham-fisted interview / confrontation between Cotton and Sid. And it does not go well. Sid gives Gail a pretty nasty backhand to the face. Good thing she wasn't wearing any rings or anything, because that wouldn't be super nice. Cotton didn't know that this was being sprung on Sid, and nobody cares. Nobody cares. Sid's pissed as hell. Gail's like, to everybody, basically, get the fuck together. She's not only is her hair like extra dark and almost evil looking in this film, but also her makeup. It's just like over the top. This is dark Gail. And her personality definitely matches with all of that in this film. I feel like she became tougher in the couple of years since the prior, the events of the prior film, because I think there's been a bit of a time jump in this.
Think it's 2 years.
Yeah. And something has just made her even nastier. I don't know, but I think it's effective. I like it. But Gail runs into Dewey now, and she's happy to see him, but he's pissed about the way he was portrayed in her book. He storms off, but of course he pays her a compliment before he does. He's like, nice streaks about her hair.
I was just going to say those streaks in her hair. I was like, I don't remember her having those, but they don't look terrible, but
no, it's very much late 90s. It's, everything like we talked about is very much of a specific time with these movies. And that's okay because it's a long-running series. It should be. But yeah, he pays her that compliment, and then we move on to that evening where Sydney and Hallie are attending that party at the sorority house. And yeah, I will say there was a time where Dave Matthews Band was all you heard on college campuses. So it was very fitting that that was there for the beginning of this party. And Hallie's defending Greek life to Sid. Sid says she's fine. The budding therapist in Hallie dissects that just a little bit. And meanwhile, at a nearby sorority house, we get Cece Cooper getting a phone call from Ghostface. This is fun. Sarah Michelle Gellar is great in this.
I love the back and forward of like she's speaking to her friend, and then she gets the call, and then she speaks to Ghostface, and then she goes back to her friend, and it's like, oh, it's her boyfriend or whatever. He's drunk, and it's like back to Ghostface. It's just like he keeps putting Ghostface on hold, and it's just
And we know it's not the same Ghostface as the previous movie, of course, but the prior Ghostface probably would have been extra pissed about all that. But yeah, I do enjoy that back and forth. She's really holding her own with him throughout a lot of this conversation. She's got, Sarah Michelle Gellar had good acting chops. It's, a shame that she doesn't do a whole lot, acting wise any longer. But yeah, she was a moment back then.
What was the last thing she was in?
Probably Clerks 3. She was one of the people auditioning for the film. Along with her husband, Freddie Prinze. Cece hangs up. Because she's getting a call from her friend. She hears a noise from upstairs. She steps outside, tries calling the campus police. But those portable phones from the late 90s with the awful reception, and she's not able to get through. So she walks back inside, and we get the jump scare of one of her sisters leaving late for the party, and that was supposedly the noise she heard upstairs. But Ghostface, of course, running through the background while they're talking. I always love those shots. I know they're cheesy as hell, but I think those are fun bits of the Scream series when you see Ghostface, but nobody else does.
Just like scurrying in the background. Mm-hmm. It's like, how could you not?
I know, because it's this big billowy robe, right? But I think the costume design is perfect for that too. It just always looks cool. So yes, back on the phone, with Ghostface repeating what her sorority sister had just said. Cece goes to turn on the alarm. And then a few creaks from upstairs later, she knows that she's not alone and the Ghostface is in the house. And let's see here. I don't know what I was typing here. She swings a foot aside, but no one is there. I know what I was saying. She opens a door and there's nobody there. Okay. That's got to be it. Phone rings again, and when she answers, Ghostface bursts out of a door behind her. She ducks under his stabbing motion, runs up the stairs with him in pursuit. She reaches an upper floor, and this is where he just throws her through a French door out onto a balcony and stabs her in the back and then just heaves her over the side onto the ground. It's a real shame because I again really enjoy her performance and I felt like she was pretty tough, but she goes out pretty fast. But brutally. I think they do up the ante with some of these kills in this movie, and there is conversation about that a little bit later. But yes, she gets thrown onto the ground, and we get Ghostface with the iconic cleaning of the knife with his glove. And then, oh my God, something's happening at the other sorority house. Everybody at the party, they all pile out to gawk and see what's going on. Everybody leaves except for basically Sid and Derek. We've got Debbie Salt out there trying to get a statement from the police, and we got the whole. I love her interactions with Gail because it's always her like trying to get something out of her, but also slightly gaslighting Gail too. I don't know how to describe it. Maybe. But the whole Gail, you're just getting here. And
there's a just go back to it, but there's a bit just after she set the alarm, and she's walking through, and there's a sign on the wall, and it says like "know something in the living room," but the way it cuts and she's walking through, it looks like it just says "no living." And I don't know if that was an intentional thing or not, but I picked it up and I was like, is this like a kind of nod to like she's going to die? Or
oh yeah, that could be very likely. That's neat. I never noticed that. I'll have to wind that back and take a look.
And then when they're in the when they're at the other sorority, like when it goes back to the party, you hear like sirens in the background,
Oh yeah,
like on
yeah.
their way.
Right around the time when everybody's, yeah, yeah, and then they all leave to go check things out. Yep. Um, so yeah, Dewey's there as well, outside, and he's just there to be mean to Gale, I guess. Also to make us think that he could potentially be the killer, because they dive into that thing again, with plenty of red herrings throughout this film, more effectively with some characters than others, because I feel like Dewey and Gale are used over and over as potential killers in this film. Um, but yeah, he's just kind of there to be nasty to her. And then in turn, Gale is just ruthless with her cameraman because she doesn't want to take it out on Dewey. Um, and we cut back to the other sorority house where basically everybody's gone. Sydney and Derek are standing on the front porch looking over at the other house. And she goes back inside to get her jacket at Derek's behest, mind you, because he's the one that says, "Hey, go get your jacket." And this is where the landline's ringing in the house, and for some reason, Sid decides to pick it up. You're muted, Keigan.
Isn't this where he leaves and they're about to leave, and then it just starts ringing, and she just turns around and is like,
He's just standing out there with his back to the doorway. The front door is wide open. He's just waiting for her while he looks at the other house. The phone's ringing. She grabs her coat, puts it on. And yeah, she looks at him, turns back, and goes and picks up the phone. And we get, hello, Sydney, blah, 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 typical Ghostface banter. And, he's like, it's showtime. And she, super charged up, screams back into the phone, then why don't you show your face, you fucking coward? And the camera cuts to the front door, which is now closed with Ghostface standing there, who says, "My pleasure." And he charges at her. And basically, Ghostface traps her in the house and he starts chasing her around. Derek doesn't even hear her screams until she's banging on the door. And we get the shot from the trailer where Ghostface plunges his knife through this door near his head. Here's the thing. It's a sorority house. Usually they're very old homes. Chances are that front door is a solid wood door. You're not plunging a hunting knife like that through a door like that. That's just not happening. Either that door got replaced with some kind of cheap fiberglass door that's meant to look like a wood door, or again, Ghostface is just supernaturally strong. I don't know. But, we see this over and over again in these movies, and it's just a little nitpick. But yeah, Derek's like trying to get inside, and she escapes Ghostface to the backyard, and Derek has just run around the house at that point, and he finds her, and for some reason makes the decision to go inside the house after Ghostface. And Dewey shows up immediately after, and he goes in after Derek, and he sees blood on the molding around a door, and he swings that open, and there's Derek on the ground with his forearm slashed, and Ghostface is gone. Dewey looks out the front door, which is wide open again, and there's the two main sorority sisters staring back at him. And he helps to patch Derek up at that point. And then all of this again in service of us trying to be misdirected as, okay, maybe Derek's the killer, or possibly even Dewey still. But yeah, yeah, I think I do like their constant use of Derek as a possible killer in this film.
But
Um,
you think they're not going to do it again, are they? That it's
right.
constantly like
Exactly.
you're like, oh,
Yeah.
surely not. It's going to be the boyfriend again. It's and
Yeah.
you totally if they did it, it would be like you would totally believe it. But I like that obviously where it goes.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, it works, and Jerry O'Connell's very charismatic too, so he's fun to watch in the role. And they cut to the hospital where Derek's getting patched up, and the police are questioning the kids, and this is where we get Mickey consoling Sid, letting her know that, hey, we're all here for you, but in the same breath he plants this idea in her head. Oh, why did Derek go back in the house? And then we get him doing, that kind of thing a few more times throughout this film too. So, yeah, I just, it's interesting. Um, and then we're over with Derek and the doctor being like, yeah, we missed every, artery, missed every nerve. You're lucky. And, Dewey's like, or it's just more convenient. Um, and they kind of, argue a little bit there. Um, and then we're, I think, back at the police station where Gail is realizing that Cece's real name is Casey. And then she's looking at the list of names on the board, and everything's going in the order of the deaths in the original Woodsboro murders with Maureen Prescott, and then Stephen, Casey's boyfriend, and then Casey herself. So they theorize that Ghostface is targeting students with the same names as those original victims, just as a way to mess with everybody and create a copycat killing. Um, yeah. Yeah. And this is, I think, Dewey and Gail starting to work together just a little bit more at this point. Also, why is she allowed in the police station? Is it just because she was involved with the original murders? I mean, she's still a reporter. Why would they want her in there?
Because it's Gil Weathers.
I
That's
guess
that's my only like explanation of like
because Gail Weathers. Okay.
and she you know what she's like in this film, like she doesn't hold back. She probably talked her way into this.
Oh, probably. Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure at this point Dewey's also nasty to her again because that's kind of his MO throughout the bulk of this movie. He's just really bitter about how things ended with them and how he's portrayed in the book. But
I feel like in this movie they never ever kind of like until kind of the last half hour
yeah.
they don't kind of come together. Like they're always kind of they work together, but then they always have this fighting kind of bickering the whole way, and then obviously at the end they kind of reconcile.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And yeah. Yep. They absolutely do. Hand on boob. Um, but ultimately, yes, we cut to Sydney. I think it's the next day. She's got two detectives that are tasked to follow her, and they're just kind of walking behind Sid and Derek at a bit of a distance. And this is where she kind of pushes Derek away a little bit, partially for his safety, but also because, there's this little seed of doubt about him in her head. She's thinking about what Mickey said, and, it is weird that he went back in the house. And of course, he was probably just trying to be the man's man, and he's going to go after the killer. And they even comment about that while he's getting patched up, about how, the 90s just aren't exactly a time for an action hero anymore. I think it was Mickey that brought that up, actually. But yeah, she kind of pushes him away because he just wants to be there for her, or so he says, because you keep getting these shots of his reactions to things. And just the way he does react still makes you think, okay, he could be the killer. I don't
But
know.
also, Jerry McConnell, he has the same facial expression throughout the whole movie. His just face just looks the same throughout the whole movie.
He's got Jerry O'Connell face. Yeah. It works though.
I mean, it's a handsome face, but like,
yeah, he's a good looking cat, right? but yeah, yeah, um, he does kind of have the same face. There are a lot of those scenes. You're right. You're right. But yeah, pushes him away, and then we get Gail again trying to reconnect with Dewey. And he still pushes her away. And she's like trying to get a smile out of him. And, he's like, I'll smile when the killer's caught. And, okay. Yeah. Big tough guy there. And then we get Mickey trying to plant seeds of doubt about Randy when they're at the dining hall getting their lunch. And everybody's like, Randy's fucking harmless. And, that's what they said about Ted Bundy and Jeffrey Dahmer. And then, Derek's a little miffed because Sydney sits down, basically the opposite corner of the table away from him, even after he pulls out a chair for her. And then he just starts pulling a Top Gun with I Think I Love You. Not a good singing voice, but there's good energy to this.
best scene in the movie.
Yeah. It's a lot of fun.
I couldn't remember if I was like, is this the one where they do this? And then I was like, oh yeah, it is, because they're in the cafeteria. I was like, oh my god, I can't wait. But I thought, in my head, for some reason, I was like, I just thought it was a whole singing and dancing number. Even though it's not, but it's like, for some reason I thought it was like going to be like he jumps.
Maybe you're thinking like 10 Things I Hate About You or something like that,
where he jumps on the table and like the whole like room joins in and starts.
Oh yeah,
like,
everybody's clapping along. Yeah, at least they do that. But yeah, this is where he hops down and he gives Sid his Greek letters on a necklace.
Big no.
Yeah, as a profession of love, but it's a major Greek faux pas. And Hallie's like, oh yeah, his brothers are going to absolutely kill him. But it's tradition. And Mickey's like, oh, tradition. Yeah, I like Mickey's energy is fun throughout this movie. It's, other than those, on subsequent rewatches, you definitely notice every time he's trying to push a particular seed of doubt or an idea at somebody. But for the most part, his energy is a lot of fun. So yes, she accepts, they kiss, they're kind of, back together again. And then we cut to Tori Spelling playing Sid, and being interviewed. As she always thought that, she'd probably get Tori Spelling after everybody else gets far better actors playing them. Yes, it's Tori Spelling playing Sid in Stab.
It's Tori Spelling playing Sydney playing herself.
Right.
So she's playing herself and Sydney, which is
yes. Again, extra meta. Yep. And it's the scene playing on the TV of Sydney running into Billy the day after he's arrested at school, and she's freaked out by him, and he's trying to apologize but also not apologize, and he's a bit of an ass, and it ends with him smacking his forehead and calling himself stupid, just like Skeet Ulrich. And of course it's Luke Wilson with the stringy Skeet Ulrich hair.
And they make him look like so emo as well with his hair, and they're like, and he's like long black hair, and he's like, Sydney.
Uh-huh. And stupid. It's perfect. It's so fucking perfect. I can't remember if he wouldn't be in Stab 2, of course. I'm trying to remember what that cast is, but we'll find out next week. Yeah. I love that little bit. And also, I love it's Randy and Dewey. They're getting some Baskin Robbins and they're discussing the rules of the sequel. And, while this interview is playing on a TV above them, and when the scene is over, Randy's like, I'll wait for video. He just doesn't care. He just doesn't care. He probably cares a little bit, but he's pissed that his character is played by somebody that was the stagecoach driver for Jane Seymour on Dr. Quinn Medicine Woman in one scene. It's a nobody, but everybody else gets Tori Spelling and Luke Wilson. So Randy is laying out the rules of the sequel. For Dewey's education here, because that's where Randy sees things going with all this. So number 1, the body count is always bigger. Number 2, the death scenes are always much more elaborate. And then he gets interrupted when he goes to rule 3. So we never get rule 3. Sorry. We'll never know. We'll never know. But yes, they also accuse each other of, potentially being suspects.
Is it both. When Dewey accuses Randy of being the killer, and then Randy's like, but that also means
if I'm a suspect,
killer.
You could be a suspect. Yes, exactly. And Dewey's got this, well, touche type look on his face. Even though he doesn't say it, he should have said that. And then we're back outside. Joel is reading Gail's book and realizing that the cameraman doesn't do so hot in the original story. And he's
I love him so much. He's such a good character.
He's all spooked out by that, and he's like, your cameraman got gutted. And she's like, he wasn't gutted. I changed that. He just had his throat slit. No big deal. Deal.
He feels like such the character where it's like, that kind of stereotypical like white person in a movie hears a noise and is like goes towards the noise, or like and does something, and he feels like the character's like stupid white people, I just run like type character, where he's like, hell no, like I just.
Well, he also brings up that black folks don't fare well in horror movies, which was quite the trope up into that point and beyond, unfortunately. But yeah, future spoilers. I really appreciate that he survives this film. Because after what they did to Maureen and Phil at the beginning of the movie, it would have been awful if they killed him too.
For some reason, I thought he did die, but then I was like,
nope. No, he just leaves. He just packs up and takes off a little bit later in this film. He's like, fuck this. But yes, at this point, Gail has convinced him to stick around. Telling him it's national television and you're never going to get an opportunity like this again if you just take off. And we cut to Sid in a theater on campus talking to the director of her play before they go on with the dress rehearsal. And I can't think of the actor's name, but he's great. And he plays this therapist in The Mouth of Madness at the beginning of that movie. He is awesome in that movie too. I also like his little line after he convinces her to continue with the role. She says to him, "You're good." And he's like, "There's no understudy. I'm desperate." It's he's just a college drama teacher. He probably gives two fucks about this play that they're doing, but he convinces her to stick around, and we cut to dress rehearsal. It's a play about Cassandra, somebody who's cursed to see the future, right? And you've got the Greek chorus behind her, which is awesome. I love a good Greek chorus. It's It's so much fun. And you got awesome costume design in this. And also the Danny Elfman piece that he wrote for this. Because, why just use an awesome Marco Beltrami score when you can also bring in some Danny Elfman? And
As it says in the credits, it says Cassandra by Danny Elfman. And I was like, oh, that's interesting.
Oh, and it's Danny Elfman as fuck too. It definitely sounds like one of his pieces. You even get a little bit of choir in it too. It's awesome. And this
the choreography is great as well.
Oh yeah. Oh, it's super so awesome. I would enjoy the shit out of a play like this, even if it is like a little, rote and a little cheesy. But it would look cool as hell, and it would still be a fun watch. So she's going through her, her lines, and like you said, there's a little bit of fun choreography as the members of the chorus, who are all robed and masked, take turns with trying to kill her, and she starts seeing flashes of Ghostface in the chorus. Now, do you think she's just imagining this at this point, or do you think he's actually there? I think it's more just her imagining it because she's super stressed out.
I thought he was actually there because they run off at one point, but I don't know if that's just kind of... It could be.
It really could be either.
Because
it's still super effective. I don't know. It looks great. And she kind of has a freak out on stage when all this happens also. Neglected to mention that. But she freaks out a little bit. The director, tells them all to take 5. She runs backstage, and Derek swings by to escort her home. And she's like, wait a minute, Mickey was supposed to be here. So maybe Ghostface was there after all, because Mickey swapped out with Derek, as because they're doing a buddy system thing to make sure that she's okay. And if Mickey swapped out, that would give him the opportunity to get in costume. You would just think that the other members of the chorus would probably notice that there's somebody who's not supposed to be there. I don't know. Or maybe not. Maybe they're all very self-absorbed. I don't know. But yes,
I was just saying, have you ever been in a theater group? Because I have.
No. I was much more band focused, but in high school. but
as someone who's been part of a few theater groups, theater kids very self-absorbed.
Well, yeah, that is kind of the stereotype, right? Oh, you're muted there.
I mean, I was just gonna say stereotype. I mean, it's real.
Yeah, it is. It is what it is. Yeah, makes sense. Okay. So yeah, Sid's freaked out because Derek wasn't supposed to be there, and she just had this freak out moment. So she kind of sends him packing. He's he's a little offended by her reaction to him, and says as much. But yeah, she's not having it, and she just takes off. I think the detectives are here as well, because I think they come charging down the aisles when she has her freak out. So she probably leaves with them. But anyways, we cut from here to Dewey, Randy, Gail, and Joel discussing the attack on Sydney and how it doesn't fit the pattern of the Woodsboro deaths. And then Joel just decides he needs a break, and he's going to go get some donuts or Prozac or crack or something, he says, and walks off. Fun little red herring there, because of course immediately after he leaves, Ghostface calls them. And this is after this fun little bit where Gail shuts down 2 calls to her cell phone of like her producer or whatever trying to get in touch with her. And Randy picks up her phone and yells into it, telling whoever it is that, hey, she's fucking busy, okay? But it's Ghostface. And they convince... I'm sorry.
Just this whole section is just so good. Like,
oh, yeah.
When they're all trying to find him, and they're like, Gail and Dewey are off together, and Randy's like running about daft, like, where the hell are you?
Yeah, they're leaving him on the phone as a distraction so that they can race around and basically tackle anybody who's on their own with a cell phone. And the one guy they get is clearly talking to his mom, and it's like, oh no, they just attacked me. Or, meanwhile, Randy is, trying to keep the killer on the phone, but also try to, have a good back and forth with him. And he's bringing up, different college themed horror films, like The Dorm That Dripped Blood and stuff like that. And he at one point is horribly offended by Ghostface, because Ghostface is getting at him about how you're never going to get the girl. And Randy lets out the most Kevin Smith movie, fuck you, at Ghostface. He is pissed. And he starts sort of pushing back at Ghostface like crazy at this point. Unfortunately, his back is to Joel's news van, and the door flies open, and he gets yanked inside, and he gets cut the fuck up. It is violent too, because there's a moment where his body's thrown against one of the side windows, shattering it. And all the noise is covered by three people walking by with a giant ass 90s boombox.
It's so funny. It's just like they come around the corner of the van, and you just see them like dancing away, and he's just like, it's just...
Yep, and they don't notice that this van's a rocking, or rather they do, so they don't come a knocking. And Ghostface pops out the other side and closes the door and scurries away, and you see the blood dripping out from the door on the passenger side.
It's so sad.
It is.
Randy's such a...
Oh, he's kind of like the heart of these films to a certain degree, right? He's the super lovable character who knows all the rules and is basically telling the audience what's going on. And, the person who gets everything that's happening that nobody listens to. Sad to see him go, especially this early in the film. But also, it tells you, hey, it's a sequel. All the bets are off. Maybe that was the third rule. That, beloved characters are probably going to die. You never know.
Yeah, because I couldn't remember if it was this one or the next one that he died, but then I remember it's his, like, stupid... Is it sister or something that's in the next? Oh, that character.
Who shows up again in part 5, yeah. But, So, Gail and Dewey are still searching around, and they come back looking for Randy, and that's when Joel shows up with a big box of donuts, which sounds so good right now. I'm not even kidding you. They open up the door, and Gail lets out this horrible scream. I'm pretty sure this part was in the trailer as well. I think the trailer totally spoiled Randy's death, if I'm not mistaken. And we were all watching tiny little QuickTime trailers back in the day, around 96 or 97. So, but I'm sure I would have watched this over and over again leading up to this film. It's a lot better now, isn't it? Let's see here. With her scream, we get Joel passing out, and there's this lovely sound of him hitting the ground. It's great. Cut to the library, and Sydney is being stalked by Ghostface via instant messenger. Again, really dating this film. And of course, they're not using a specific one. It's not ICQ. It's not AIM. It's not, Microsoft. What was it? Instant Messenger. I don't remember. But yeah, she gets freaked out because she can tell it's Ghostface, and she stands up and the chair falls behind her, and the detectives come rushing in as they're, searching around people's computers trying to find who's sending the messages. And there was a very helpful student sitting next to her who mentions how it would have to be somebody logged into one of these computers sending that. So we know he's in the building. And as the detectives kind of pull her aside and just leave her, Cotton pops up from around the corner. And, Diane fucking Sawyer, he's trying to convince her to, leave Gail in the dust and come do this interview in New York with him, where they're going to get $10,000 each and a whole hour of national evening news time. And she doesn't want to have anything to do with this, but Cotton is like extra creepy and aggressive about all of this too. So, he's a pretty good red herring as far as things go in this film, just from that standpoint. He's also kind of a dipshit. I don't know.
He just makes the wrong decisions.
Yeah.
He's trying to do good, but it's just like it's like he just doesn't know how to deal with the situations correctly.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is also just him looking out for himself and wanting to, get his 15 minutes and get his money, because he feels, and rightly so, because he was done really wrong in the events before the first film.
Also, $10,000, that's quite a lot for 1997.
Yeah, and that's the other funny thing. People don't typically get paid to be interviewed. That's like
not
big
like
no in journalism. So that was weird. But, maybe ABC News was just that desperate for this interview at the time. I don't know. You didn't really have Fox News popping off quite yet at that time. So, and CNN would have been the king of cable news right there. I don't know. And this is where the police step in and they find him, and, they take him to the station to question him. And they got nothing to hold him on or anything.
This is the scene with David Arquette's dad in it.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And I think the detectives are there as well. And they got to let him go. And the decision's made to take Sid and her roommate Hallie somewhere safe. Haha. And Joel, the cameraman, he's scared that he's going to be the next target at this point. So he's like, he says the tired and true line of Sia wouldn't want to be at the Gale as he storms off. This is very 1997 right there. Yeah, Gail feels bad. She keeps saying that she feels bad to Dewey. Oh, did you know she feels bad? And this is where they realize that Joel left all of his footage, and it's all this crowd coverage that he shot. And if the killer was there, lurking and, watching them as he was talking to him, then he's got to be on the film. So they decide, okay, we got to find a fucking VCR. And, I know why. Because Joel's news van got impounded because it was a crime scene. That's why they can't use the news van to watch the footage. Okay, that makes sense. I'm sorry. I'm just, 25 years later realizing a plot point of the movie. But ultimately they decide, okay, we got to go find a VCR somewhere because we could find the killer here. And as night falls on campus, they go to, what does the plaque say? School of Film. It's kind of cheesy sounding, but they run into this building. And they're looking around for an open door. They realize they're basically breaking and entering. But they do find an open lecture hall, And they run down the stairs to the front desk there, and they find some AV equipment, and they start looking through things.
And they find their horn.
Yeah, just a little bit. Just a little bit. Bonk. But yeah, they start looking through that stuff, and Gail yes. As they find their horn, she said, they clunk heads because they're so stupid for each other. At least the one time, but possibly twice. And Dewey keeps apologizing for absolutely everything as they kind of stumble around each other. And it's clear they're just absolutely stupid in love with each other. And Gail apologizes to him for like the umpteenth time in this movie. And they finally kiss. And next thing you know, they're rolling around on that desk together and making out. And ultimately, another video starts playing in the lecture hall. And Gail notices right away, and she bolts upright with Dewey's hand still on her boob. And she's like, Dewey! He apologizes right away and yanks his hand back. It's so good. But yes, they realize that somebody's up there in the AV booth above all the seats, and they see the ghost face mask in the tiny little window. And yeah,
I hate to question it, but how does Ghostface show live footage of them on
pardon me,
on the desk, but it's in the VCR? I mean, you have to not question it, but it's like,
well, I mean, it's a whole AV booth for a lecture hall, so I'm sure there's like a VCR up there where he's playing a bunch of his footage, or because we know who this is up there. Spoilers, it's Mickey, but and he's got a little handheld camera, a little camcorder with him throughout the bulk of this movie. He's shooting a lot of stuff, like a lot of film students do. He probably has all this footage on a tape in that thing, and he's obviously got it plugged into the AV setup up there. And you could just shift over on one of those and broadcast what's being filmed. So that's probably how he's getting these shots.
Maybe I was just thinking the technology was older than what it actually is, and I was just like,
yeah. And maybe I just hand waved it away. I don't know, but yeah, you wouldn't be wrong in thinking that yes, all of the AV technology from back then was so old that you couldn't get away with shit like this, but you could. It was advanced enough. Says the 43-year-old man. But yeah, from here, Dewey goes charging up the stairs after Ghostface, run up to that AV booth, and there's nobody there. And of course, while he was running up, if not Mickey, it's the other killer, because spoilers, there's two killers again, that pops up behind Gail and takes a stab at her. And this is where Dewey basically falls down all of the stairs of the lecture hall. That can't feel good, especially with his prior injuries and everything. Got Gail running through the hallways of the building with Ghostface in pursuit. She's trying all the doors. She finally finds one that leads her into a recording studio. She gets into the booth. And, she's behind some soundproof glass, and that's where, she just comes around a corner and sees Ghostface there, but he had his head turned, so he didn't see her. And she, quick jumps back. And she kind of wanders deeper into the room. and they're kind of chasing each other around the soundproofing, and it looks cool. Anytime you've got Ghostface kind of looking around and, just kind of wandering, past, hallways or aisles or anything, it always looks cool as hell.
It's very cat and mouse at this point.
Oh yeah.
Like,
Oh yeah.
And this is like the even second half, but like from when Randy gets killed, which is like the hour mark. The last hour is just this is my whole favorite part of the film. I think the first half is like, it's all right, but like the second half is like what really made it for me. This like the whole, especially the last half an hour and like the killers, but this whole cat and mouse, and then obviously what we'll get to with Sydney and yeah.
Yep. Yeah, things really pick up at this point for sure. So yeah, they're chasing each other around the soundproofing, and Gail steps into another room which has its own set of soundproof glass, and Dewey steps in on the other side of that glass. Gail's got her back to it so she doesn't see him. He walks up to it, starts pounding on it. I feel like even though the audio wouldn't come through, you'd still, because the glass is moving, you would hear something.
Moving, but it's like you see the glass moving when Dewey's banging on it, but then it cuts to Gail's side and the glass is like still. And I'm like,
okay, so a little continuity error there. Yeah.
So is it like two sheets of glass, or is it like really thick glass? But it's a bit like,
I don't know, but while he's pounding on the glass trying to get her attention, Ghostface comes up behind him and stabs the shit out of him. And he's getting mashed up against the glass and his blood smeared everywhere. And I think this is where he gets his hand on a button that keys a microphone, and she finally hears everything from the other room. And she watches as, her flame here is supposedly killed in front of her. And she races over and locks the door just in time. And Ghostface tries throwing a chair against the glass, and it doesn't work. And she just backs up and cowers in a corner. She's broken. It's a shame. It's yeah. But we cut to Derek saying his goodbye to Sid because she's about to leave with the detectives who are going to drive her and Haley off to safety. She kisses him and hops into the car without a word. And he watches them drive off, and we see a robed figure in the distance, and we're like, oh no. But then there's more of them, and it's clearly, not Ghostface at that point. And it's Derek's brothers from his fraternity who are going to essentially kick his ass for giving away his letters. And we get Portia and Rebecca as well. They're along for the ride because it's going to be a party. And they take him to the theater where they tie him up to this star that was part of the play and basically write all over him and spray him with beer and just torture him in a wonderful bit of hazing.
I forgot it was the fraternity people that tied him up. For some reason, I thought when you get later on, I thought it was the killers that tied him up and like put him up there. But yeah, I completely forgot about this like whole the fraternity like doing this to him.
And they're making a mess. I mean, there's beer spraying everywhere. They're just dumping drinks on him, and there's a party going on while all this is happening on the stage of Sydney's play. Okay. Yeah, we cut from here to the cops driving the girls off, and they ask them where they're going, and then the cop in the passenger seat, he's like, "Hey, if we told you, we'd have to kill you." And then the cop, who is supposed to be gay, turns back and delivers the "don't ask, don't tell" line. And then immediately his window is broken in and his throat is slashed by Ghostface. So, yep, let's kill the gay dude. That wonderful old trope. This part doesn't hold up so well, does it? Again, this film in all of its 1997 glory. So yeah, Ghostface beats the shit out of the other detective and throws him in front of the car. The killer tries to run him down, but the cop ends up on the hood. He's like yelling at the girls to get down so he can try to shoot the guy. And Ghostface is weaving all over the road, sideswiping cars and everything, and ends up crashing into a bit of construction. And there's a big old pipe that runs itself right through the cop's head and through the window. But Ghostface has been knocked unconscious. And a little bit, because of course Sid and Hallie are in the back of this police car. So they've got, the grate, and the doors don't open from the inside, but the pipe has caused the grate to come off of the frame a little bit. So Sid's able to pull it back and get just enough of an opening where she can crawl into the front seat, and she has to make her way over the sweetly sleeping Ghostface to try to get out of the car because they're blocked on the other side by this construction. And as she's climbing over him, she thinks about reaching for his mask to pull it off and see who it is, and elbows the car horn. Nice move. Nice move.
I don't know about yours. My head canon is, I don't know how long he's knocked out for, but I'm convinced that he's playing knocked out, and that he's like purposely letting her out.
I don't know, because later we see quite a big bruise on this dude's head, but I think he's at least knocked out while Sydney gets through. I don't know about Hallie, because Sydney tries to get the door open from the outside. It's locked. It just won't open. So Hallie has to climb through as well. She really doesn't want to. She's able to help her out. And they run away like they should. And then Sydney's curiosity gets the better of her. Stupid Sydney, because she gets her friend killed. She has to go back to see who the killer is. And by the time she makes it back to the car, Ghostface is gone, but has managed to run around all the construction and leap out behind Hallie and stab the shit out of her. Yep.
This
Horror
is
movie
another,
physics.
This is another white person making dumb decisions.
Oh, yeah. Yes, it is.
Which
yes,
is just every horror movie story anyway.
Oh, pretty much. Yeah. Yep. Hallie goes down, unfortunately. And Sid runs away with Ghostface probably cleaning the knife again like he usually does and chasing after. And let's see here. This is where we cut back to Gail leaving her hiding place. And she steps out into the hallway and is grabbed by Cotton. And he's got blood all over his hands. And, he makes a comment about how he found Dewey and was trying to help him. And she immediately thinks, oh no, you're the killer. And so she runs and runs out of the building and finds Debbie Salt at a payphone, calling something into her newspaper. And she just grabs the phone out of her hands and, and tries to get the police or whatever. And, it's like, the killer has gotten weary. And we get Debbie's reaction of, gotten weary?
He's someone, even when I watched it the first time, I was like, he was someone that I was like, it's not him. He was someone I never thought it was going to be.
Yeah, it's way too easy. And it plays off way too much like a red herring, right? But and they cut from there to, yes, Sid running up to the theater where her play was meant to take place. And somebody's inside starting up the music for the play and getting all the effects going and everything and kind of setting the mood. And I think the music kind of draws her in and she thinks, oh, great. Gus is there, my director. I can get help from him. And she enters the theater and she calls out for him a few times. And she makes it onto the stage. And all of a sudden the music cuts out and there's a spotlight on her. And as she's running around the stage, you've got all the backdrops falling down and closing her in. I like this. It's fun and effective, and it's great use of the all the set dressing for the play that she was supposed to be in. And as she's fully closed in, and there, you do notice at this point, there's this half-hearted attempt with some of the set dressing for the movie, not the play, of showing that, yes, a party took place here, because there's like a solo cup, a can, and a bottle sitting by, like on a table near a door that's locked. And meanwhile, this horrible mess that the frat and sorority made, hazing the shit out of Derek, got completely cleaned up. They were very responsible partiers. But there's a reason for the can and the bottle and the stuff to be there. We'll get there later. So yes, all of a sudden Derek drops down, still tied up. He's passed out. He's got one of the masks on his face, from the chorus. Oh, even before this, Sid notices Derek's shirt hanging from something or other, and the spotlight focuses on it. And she almost gives it you almost see her like give it a little sniff or something, and she realizes it's him. And that's when Derek falls down. She unmasks him, sees the duct tape on his face. She rips that off and slaps him awake. And yeah. This is where Ghostface arrives behind her, probably with another surprise, Sydney, something like that. It's kind of the iconic line, right? But takes the mask off, and it's Mickey. I don't know. You're muted, Keigan.
No, I was just going to do the hello, Sydney.
Yeah. And yeah, he drops the voice changer because don't really need that anymore with your mask off. And I don't remember, because this is so many years ago at this point, if I was like really surprised that it was Mickey or not at this point. Unfortunately, having seen the movie several times, it's, you're just going to watch it to pick up on the little hints throughout things. But yes, Mickey reveals that, yes, he is the killer, but he's gaslighting the shit out of her to make her believe that Derek is the other killer. And Derek is protesting, and he's getting pretty fired up for somebody who's mostly naked and tied up and unable to fight back. And yeah, Mickey just shoots him in the chest. He goes down pretty quick too, as one does when they're shot right in the chest. He says some, kind final words to Sydney about, how he never would have hurt her. And then he's donezo. And it turns out that Mickey intends to kill Sydney and allow himself to be arrested so that he can blame violence in movies for the murders at his trial, and then end up getting, fame and notoriety because of all of that.
Isn't there something in the classroom at the beginning when they talk about violence in movies?
Yeah.
I can't remember if it's him that brings it up, and I want to say it was, but it's like,
this is a very late 90s, very 90s conversation, actually, about the influence of media on, particularly children and teenagers. And this would hit a fever pitch about 2 years later with the Columbine shootings, where The Matrix and the music of Marilyn Manson was all, brought to the forefront of why all this happened, not just easy access of disturbed kids to guns. No, that would be too easy. But Mickey wants to blame all of this on everything that happens, and he talks about how he's going to get. He mentions O.J. Simpson's lawyers by name as his own lawyers, and he'll get freaking Bob Dole on the stand and the Christian Coalition paying for his defense. And while he's blathering and rambling about all of this, we get this awesome bit of Sydney with Derek's Greek letters, getting them ready. And then she takes this swipe at his face with it and kicks him and knocks the gun away and everything. And man, she almost gets the gun and gets the upper hand here. But after they fight a little bit, we're right back to Mickey with the gun. And yeah. Although I love the thing with the necklace. It's so good. But let's see here. Mickey gets the gun back, and then all of a sudden Derek's body gets lifted up, and he's all, "Oh, who could that be?" Because yes, after all, there was a second killer. He has an accomplice, and the door opens, and Gail steps in. And of course, Sydney's like, Gail, no. But no, she's just followed by Debbie Salt holding a gun on her. And
Mrs. Loomis?
And Gail's like, wait a minute. I've seen all sorts of photos on you. And Sydney's like, yeah, but this is like 60 pounds and a lot of work done later. It's a great fucking line. But Loomis is, she's pissed. Sydney killed her little boy, and she's going to get her revenge. But I again love the fake out with Gail entering first. And this is where Mickey talks about, again, all the wonderful fame and everything that's going to come from his trial. And she says, "Oh, Mickey, there's not going to be a trial." And then she betrays him and shoots him. And as he's going down and Gail's trying to run away, he kind of reflexively pulls the trigger of his gun and catches her in the gut. And I think Loomis says some kind of a line about 2 birds with 1 stone or something like that. You also notice she's not particularly great with the gun. She's just kind of using it out of necessity. Her shots are a little wild. But now she starts doing the villain monologue stuff with Sydney. I'm sure Sydney's getting really tired of people monologuing at her. But they all want to do it because they want her to know why they're doing it, right? That's the plight of every villain. She reveals that she's seeking revenge against Sydney for killing her son Billy, but Sydney points out, the hypocrisy of her motive here. Because, hey, you abandoned your kid. That's why he was fucked up the way he was. And what did she say? Something about, hey, was that a disparaging remark against my son? And as they're kind of going back and forth, and Loomis is sort of backing her up against a wall with the gun, Sid pulls one of those, hey, look over there type things, saying, hey, isn't Mickey supposed to be dead? And this is where the bottle comes into play, because she crashes that over Mrs. Loomis's head and gets behind this wood door and throws a beam across it. And you get Loomis firing away at it and missing her with every shot. And Loomis is watching through one of the bullet holes as Sydney goes and grabs his fire axe. And she got the idea because one of the bullets clips a cable that's holding up something or other that falls down onto the stage. And so she starts slashing away at all the different ropes. And you've got lighting rigs and other bits of set dressing just falling all over the place.
Is this where she like kind of shakes the thunder things as well?
Oh
like
yeah, she's firing up all the stuff with the music and the lights and everything else because she wants to make this a horrible experience for Loomis. She wants to add confusion to the situation, and you get Loomis trying to get out of there, trying to scale some of the set, and then all these foam blocks come falling down on top of her, and it's while sure they're not stone, they're still going to be relatively heavy. And she falls a decent ways, and it looks like she gets buried by them, but Sydney takes off through the backstage, and Loomis jumps in with a knife after her, and they're fighting and rolling around and stuff, and basically, Loomis has the upper hand, but that's when a gunshot rings out and Cotton steps onto the stage. It's like, how many more special guests can we possibly have in this ending here?
It's the finale.
Yeah, I guess. Let's bring everybody out of the woodwork. Hey, where's Sid's dad? We could bring him in too. But ultimately, yeah, Cotton has no idea what the fuck is going on. He's been having an awful day and he wants some answers. Debbie's got the knife to Sydney's throat, and she's kind of using her as a shield. And Cotton, is like stepping around all the carnage, keeping the gun trained on him. And it's very clear whose side he's on. He's sort of, hamming it up a little bit for Loomis to, give the situation time to play out a little bit here. And he mentions Diane Sawyer again, I think. And let's see here. This is where Sydney agrees basically to do the interview. What does she say? Consider it done. And Cotton just blows Loomis away, hits her in the shoulder, but she goes down like she's dead. Sid gets up. They have a quick little conversation. Cotton apologizes for, being weird. And she just takes the gun from him. She's like, whatever, dude. But they kind of poke at Loomis a little bit to see if she's dead. And this is where a hand pops up from the orchestra pit, and it's Gail. She's still alive. And Cotton's like, you scared the shit out of us. As they're pulling her up, he's like, anybody else down there with you?
How did she not die from like smoke inhalation?
I don't know. That's a good question. But yeah, she has survived. She even makes the comment that it just bounced off of her ribs. Okay. I think you'd be in agony still, but whatever. So I think this is where Gail asks for one of the guns. I don't know why, but probably just so they can get the next shot, because they're talking about whether or not Loomis is dead, and Mickey just pops up behind them all. And they both turn around and super aggressively blow him away, while Cotton's like ducking and like shitting the situation. And then he's down on the ground. Sid just walks over to Loomis and just calmly puts one bullet right in her forehead, just like her son. And God, what's her line here? She just says very calmly, just in case, and shrugs and walks off while everybody's got their mouth hanging open. That's something I feel like they should all get their stories straight about before talking to the cops, because that might not play well for her. I don't know. But nobody else saw it, so we're good. We're good. So we're back outside. Morning has come. Uh, and the police are and the paramedics, they're getting Dewey out of there. He's still alive and he's totally out of it. He's got an oxygen mask on, and Joel shows up and he's like putting the microphone in Gail's hand, and he's got his camera on her and he's trying to give her motivation, and she sees Dewey and she just hands the mic back and runs off. She's elated to find that he's alive still. And somehow, there's an off the cuff remark about how there was old scar tissue from his prior injuries that saved his life. Sure. Whatever. But clearly Dewey is more important to her than getting this story at this point, because she hops into the ambulance with him. It is revealed that Gail has a heart of gold after
character growth.
Yes. It's you love to see it. So yeah, they cut to all the reporters. They're trying to get a word from Sydney, and she just directs them to Cotton, like he's the real hero. He's the reason why we're all alive still, basically throwing him a bone. And he just tells everybody, hey, there's a time and a place and a price for my interview, and just hands them a card, and they're all whining about it. And then Sid just kind of walks off into the sunset as some late 90s collective soul plays here.
With a weird camera shot.
Yeah. And that's really common in films of this era. It's just that, helicopter shot pulling away, right? Because they wouldn't have had drones back then. But why are the cops not questioning anybody involved with any of this? Everybody's just free to let the reporters in. Let them come on in. We don't need to question these people right away. No, none of that. Not at all. Yeah, it's just weird. But yeah, she just kind of walks off, and that's that. And the credits start, and we get through a healthy dose of credits before we get that final little stinger of Ghostface images and another title card of Scream 2. And then we go on to, credits in earnest with Less Than Jake cover of I Think I Love You. And that's it. Credits.
The only thing that puts me off these films is Harvey Weinstein.
Oh, big time.
And it's
that guy.
Oh, it's so upsetting.
It is, because there are so many films out of the 90s and early aughts that we would not have without them. But also, fuck that guy.
Yeah.
Also during the credits, we get all those character shots along with the actors' names, which is always fun.
I love those.
I love when they do that. I don't know that they do that with all of these movies. I guess I'll find out in the coming weeks, because I don't remember. But I felt like they brought it back in a way in Scream 5. I don't know, but that's fun. It speaks to a certain time period of film for sure. But yeah, we go from that piece of music to, I think, a Weezer song, and we end up with some Master P. So some very, very late 90s hip hop there. But yeah, that's Scream 2. This fucking movie.
It's wild ride, but it's, I wouldn't have it any other way.
Yeah. I will say it's fun. Is it my least favorite Scream movie? Yeah, it is. I actually enjoy the others quite a bit more, but it's still a fun ride. There's all sorts of cool stuff that happens among the less than cool stuff. I'm sure there's stuff that I can pick out in the third film that doesn't hold up super well either. But you kind of have to go along for the ride with some of these things. I think
it's the killer's motivations that are quite strong for me.
Yeah.
The Mrs. Loomis, obviously that makes sense because of Billy
revenge.
Yeah, the revenge. Like, because when I watched that for the first time, I was like, oh shit, like that is great. It's
Hmm.
but
Yeah, it's surprising that it's her. Um, yeah, Laurie Metcalf is great. If you've never gone back and watched any old episodes of Roseanne, she was always so good on that show. And she was riding a big high from that. And then, isn't she the mom in Lady Bird? Pretty
I'm not
sure she
sure.
is. But regardless, she's a great actress. She's, I think, a little underutilized, but she's great. Um, it's a hell of a cast in this movie. Um, again
Big
with Sarah
names.
Michelle Gellar and yeah, that
Jada
was the whole.
Pinkett.
Yep, and Omar Epps and yeah, yeah. I can't think who the actor is that plays Joel because I don't remember what else he's been in. But that was always the thing with the Scream movies. So much of the cast, they are people that are known. And, because horror films are famous for having a lot of unknowns. And, there's probably a little bit less of a draw because of that. But it's probably part of what made the original Scream such a big success because people were like, hey, I know those people. Let's go see this movie. And then the same with this sequel because the first one did so well. This one, I think, did slightly better, maybe in the box office. The numbers are at least pretty similar. But yeah, yeah, it's a fun romp. Do I like it as well as some of the others? No. But yeah, there's a lot of fun stuff. Like you said, all the theater stuff is super cool. I appreciate all the film studies stuff too. Um, it's cool. Awesome pregnant pause. Thanks, Keigan. Um,
We'll do
but
one of those kind of funny pauses where, like,
yep,
Greg likes to do, where he likes to do the pause, and it keeps people on their toes. That's what we're doing.
yep, absolutely. That was exactly what happened there. It's not that we have put everything out here on the recording and we have no more final thoughts on Scream 2. No, not that at all. But seriously, Keigan, any final thoughts on Scream 2?
It was fun to watch it again. And yeah, I didn't necessarily love it as much as I did, but I still thoroughly enjoyed it. And I'm I'm really interested now to go back and watch the others.
Yeah.
After watching this one to see how those compare.
I think it's a lot of fun to be able to watch them all, with close proximity to each other, just
Yeah.
because, you get a little bit more out of it when you're watching a series like that. There's something to be said about, the distance between some sequels, and how, if you haven't seen it in many, many years, the original, before you move on to a new film in the series, how the nostalgia factor plays in a bit. But yeah, being able to binge a series of movies pretty close together is always fun. There's a reason why we do it. But Keegan, that was Scream 2. If you'd
It
like,
was.
where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Keigan Hill. You can find me on Letterboxd because I use that a lot. If you search Keigan Hill up, you'll probably find me. Um, yeah, that's probably more where I am on things. So the Letterboxd, more followers on there. Because I like to see what people are watching, gives me
Yeah,
more
that's always
ideas.
fun.
Um,
Absolutely. Yeah.
love
Um,
seeing what people are liking or hating, or
mhm.
what their reviews are. Yeah, and I love getting ideas on what to watch on there because sometimes, I mean, I've got so much I need to watch, but
Oh,
sometimes
yeah.
it's like I'm not in the mood to watch that. So I'm like, is there something else that I can maybe find? So yeah, I love seeing, like, for yourself, or I don't know, friend of the show Madeline or Dim. Um,
Mhm.
I'll be like, oh, I'll add that to
Oh,
the list.
yeah, those two are always watching cool stuff. Give Freddie Nudie a follow. Just because he's been getting into some older films lately, and it's fun to see his takes on those. I've been trying to use Letterbox a bit more this year. I tried to jump in last year, and I just didn't keep up with it. This is my year where anytime I see a movie, I need to make a post about it, not just from being more involved with it, but so that I have a catalog of what I've actually seen, because that's very useful later on in the year.
Yeah, it's good for going and looking back to see like what you thought of things. Like sometimes you kind of forget what I was like, oh, did I like that? And it's good to go and see what you wrote, even if I don't do like massive in-depth reviews on it. I just kind of
Oh,
do
same.
like a couple of thoughts on like I did Meg and I just like recently saw that and I was
Yeah.
like s- just like dumb thoughts on the movie rather than like, oh, this is kind of this comment on it wasn't
Dumb
serious
thoughts on a
reviews.
dumb movie that's also
Yeah,
fun as hell.
yeah,
Super fun.
yeah. Um
God, we need more of that in our lives for sure, because that was we
Megan
talk.
2 Megan 2.0 in 2025, so
There you go. There you go. Yeah, bring the camp. Bring the camp, because I'm here for it. So yeah, people go check out Keigan on Letterboxd and Twitter if you can stand Twitter these days. I know it's a little rough at times, but this has been Murders with Mertens, a horror film podcast. Thank you for letting us tickle your ear holes. Please like, share, and subscribe if you are so inclined. I'll be back soon enough with another episode. But until next time, stay spoopy, everyone.